This article was written by Walter Ganong, who was a native of Coahoma County and appeared in Forest and Stream in its February 12, 1898 issue. An interesting fact about Ganong is that as a teenager, while on a trip to Memphis, he killed a panther that was perched on a lamppost in that city, apparently having been driven from the Mississippi bottom by high water. If you find these readings worthwhile, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Thank you. Camp Tallahatchie by Walter Ganong. New Orleans. Editor, Forest and Stream. It is so rare to find a contribution to your interesting journal from the far South that I am constrained to monopolize a portion of your valuable space with an account of a recent outing in North Mississippi in which the late yellow fever epidemic in this city enabled me to participate. By way of parenthesis, however, I wish to add that it is remarkably strange that our southern sportsmen are so lax in advertising to our northern brethren through such an excellent medium as the Forest and Stream, the rare sport to be had in southern waters, fields, and forests during the fall and winter. I am not willing to believe we are selfish, for we are not built that way. I prefer to feel that our timidity and bashfulness prevent us from rushing into print to vaunt our advantages over other sections. On September 2nd last, I ruffled my plumage and took flight from the city of New Orleans to the little village of Jonestown, Coahoma County, northwest Mississippi, for a 2 weeks visit to my family. On September 6th, thereafter, the daily papers announced the first genuine case of yellow fever. Before the expiration of my leave, the fever had gained considerable headway, and although important official matters awaited my attention in the Crescent City, I could not help feeling that I had a 15-year life insurance policy to outlive, to say nothing of a few suits of old clothes which I had not worn quite threadbare. Consequently, I communed with myself and decided that inasmuch as I was away from my post and my official matters were in the hands of a jolly good soul by name of Fry, who didn't care a copper whether he had the fever or a lottery ticket, I would remain in the country and leave the other fellow to hold the bag. The fever continued to rage in New Orleans, and I continued to enjoy the rare sport to be had with ride and gun in northwest Mississippi. On November 15th of each year, an annual bear hunt takes place from the little village of Jonestown. This is not a local affair, and the boys are always glad to entertain their visiting sportsmen. I was so fortunate as to be a member of this little party, and a jollier gathering could scarcely be found in the entire country. Our party consisted of 10 gentlemen and 4 ladies, all of whom, except possibly the writer, are as true sportsmen and sportswomen as ever trod the soil of fair old Mississippi. On the night of November 15, at 11 o'clock, we left civilization behind and became residents of the wilderness for about 10 consecutive days. The weather was dark and threatening, and the temperature suggested snow, but I presume the weather prophet effected some kind of a compromise with the elements, whereby we were furnished a cold rain during more than 6 hours of our journey. Our destination was the wilderness, Tallahatchie County, about 45 miles from our starting point, and our camp was very appropriately designated Tallahatchie by Mr. M.R. Mitchell, who, among others, was taken in custody by the Quitman County officials and deprived of the fruits of his outing on the ground of trespass, the county of Quitman having passed laws prohibiting the hunting of game by non-residents. There being some doubt as to our exact location, Mr. Mitchell decided to split the difference between Tallahatchie and Quitman, and henceforth our camp was called Tallahatchie. We reached Boyce Lake the following morning about 10 o'clock, thoroughly drenched with the cold rain of the preceding night. Almost before we could realize it, there were 6 tents pitched in canes such as I had not seen before. Needless to add, the ladies had everything shipshape in short order, and camp life didn't seem so bad after all. But it must not be supposed that the ladies are admitted on these occasions for convenience. On the contrary, they handle the rifle equally as well as they manipulate a venison steak and are thorough woodswomen. I have reason to know that at least one of them is unexcelled, for on one occasion when I and my chum were hopelessly lost, she piloted us safely to camp after wandering several hours in heavy cane. We had quite an army of bear hounds, and the first 3 days were devoted exclusively to brewing. And needless to add, we rolled in bear meat for more than a week, for the first day out crowned our outing a howling success. We succeeded in bringing to bay a fine large black bear which was killed by Mr. Evans, one of the local sportsmen, through whose courtesy I secured the hide. The yarns I have told since my return about how I killed it would fill a large book. The next day, bright and early, found me on a stand in a strange and secluded spot, and the dogs heading directly my way. Being somewhat of a tenderfoot, and never before having encountered quite so large and vicious an animal as a bear, I must confess that I felt kind of curious as the dogs came nearer and nearer, till I could hear the cane cracking under the awful tread of this huge beast as he came through the wilderness. One of the party in close proximity to me claims to have seen me making earnest efforts to ascend the topmost height of a small tree nearby, but I am confident he exaggerated the true situation to some extent, though had I then known that it was a panther instead of a bear, I am not so sure but that I might have discovered this little tree to be most conveniently located. Fortunately, however, for the panther and for me, he suddenly changed his course and put back into the cane, just before reaching the open glade in which I was so anxiously waiting. We were unsuccessful in bringing to bay another bear, though we forced more than one to protect his hide from the taxidermist by swimming the Tallahatchie River. So after the third day, we unanimously decided to devote the remainder of our stay to stocking our larders with venison. It was an easy mark to start a deer within half a mile of our camp, but most of us preferred still hunting. The weather was delightfully cool, and daybreak each morning found us scattered over the feeding grounds and anxiously awaiting the gay and festive buck. We were rarely disappointed on the evening's roundup, and each day brought fresh venison into our camp. One bright morning, just before breaking up camp, I saw a monster panther, some 300 yards distant, endeavoring to capture a small doe which had been wounded a few moments before. In my anxiety to add this valuable rug to my parlor floor, I overlooked the fact that I had in hand a .44 Marlin of the latest pattern, and instead of elevating the sights and taking chances on a long shot, I at once set forth at breakneck speed toward the spot. Of course, the panther quietly slunk away into the heavy cane, and I was left to meditate on the science of running down large game. On my relating this little experience on my return to camp that afternoon, some of the boys were unkind enough to suggest that it was probably a large fox squirrel. I resented this insinuation most vigorously, on the ground that it would, in the natural order of things, have been absolutely impossible for my vision to have become so distorted and my imagination so vivid as to manufacture a very large panther out of an ordinary old everyday fox squirrel. Our record at the end of 10 days stood 1 bear and 8 deer, to say nothing of all kinds of smaller game with which this country abounds. We were not without our little camera, and our friend Mr. A.V. Lane took some beautiful snapshots at different stages, but as they are still in process of development, I am unable to enclose them with this. In our daily rambles, we had the good fortune to meet quite a number of jolly sportsmen from various sections of the country, among whom were Mr. Oliver Clay and Captain Ben McKee of Mississippi. As bear hunters, these two gentlemen are without peer, unless it be the great and only Bob Bobo, whose reputation is so well known that comment is unnecessary. There were also the Messrs. Matthews and Party of Tennessee, whose camp was located on Tallahatchie River, about 7 miles distance from us, and about the same distance in another direction was the camp of Mr. Joseph Aycock, a most charming conversationalist as well as an accomplished musician. And last, but by no means least, Captain James L. Bradford of New Orleans was at the same time only about 6 miles distant. Captain Bradford is the envied possessor of Buck Ranch, and therefore needs no introduction to the readers of Forest and Stream, as mention has frequently appeared in these columns of the genuine hospitality with which the captain's guests are always greeted, and he who has not had the good fortune to visit Buck Ranch and its surroundings knows not the pleasure of a touch of real high life in a Mississippi wilderness. All the aforesaid gentlemen broke camp and joined our little party except Captain Bradford, and our misfortune in not securing him, too, was due to no lack of effort on our part, but failure of our emissary to deliver our invitation. To make a long story short, we broke camp about November 25th, after having consumed so much venison and bear meat that we were locking horns and climbing trees till civilization was again sighted. Everyone was happy and glad he went, and I am very much in hope that something may happen to detain me in Mississippi again about the same time next November. In drawing the curtain on this camp hunt, I wish to add that I have never seen duck shooting quite so good as we found it in northwest Mississippi during November and December. It was an easy mark to bag more than we could carry of those large mallards in a very short time. The feeding grounds were excellent and the ducks abundant, and the large consignments which Brother Lane and I made to our friends in Chicago and New Orleans were distinct evidences of the rare sport furnished us on the many lakes to be found throughout that part of the state. Signed, Walter S. Ganong.